There are only white dazzling plains and glaciers washed by icy Arctic waters. It's so cold here that tears turn into icicles within seconds. Over 100 sailors are trying to build a fire and find food. There's less and less hope for survival left, because all these experienced people know that no one will come to save them. The world's most modern and technologically equipped ships, created for sailing through such places, are stuck in the Arctic ice near the group. These people were sure that they could defeat nature in these regions, but in the end, they got trapped. Terrible events are awaiting them in the next few days or even weeks, and over the following decades, the whole world will try to solve the mystery of the disappearance of this expedition. So it all started in 1845, when HMS Erebus and HMS Terror set off from the Thames on a great Arctic voyage. The British Admiralty wanted to lay a route between the Atlantic and the Pacific through the ice bays of Canada. The trip had two goals, economic and scientific. Britain wanted to study Earth's north magnetic pole better to understand geomagnetic science. This was also an important step in creating maritime navigation in that region. The Europeans hoped to pave the Northwest Passage to open cheap and safe trade routes with China. The exchange of goods, such as silk, spices, and others, would significantly improve Britain's economy and strengthen diplomatic relations with the eastern region. Such an ambitious goal required ambitious preparation, so the country created two of the best and most technologically advanced ships of that time. The hulls of the ship were covered with additional iron layers of protection to withstand collisions with icebergs. Engineers installed air passages connected to the central heating system inside the cabins of the crew members so that none of the sailors would freeze. The massive amount of coal in the cargo hold was supposed to maintain a warm temperature all over the ship for a long time. Also, for a comfortable trip, the team took food stocks that would be enough for 3 years and many books to keep their minds in good shape. But the main technical attribute was steam engines, a new technology for that time, especially for marine shipbuilding. The engines were supposed to ensure the movement of ships in case of windless weather. Erebus and Terror were the most protected and unsinkable ships of that time. Imagine if you compare them with ordinary wooden boats with sails. The crew of both vessels consisted of strong travelers and sailors, and experienced officer Sir John Franklin led the entire expedition. Ready for the difficulties and harsh conditions of the Arctic, the crew boarded Erebus and Terror and sailed from the English village of Greenhithe. John Franklin was supposed to enter the Northwest Passage through the upper part of North America, sail through uncharted Arctic waters, and, in the rays of glory, go out into the Pacific Ocean. 3 months after the beginning of the journey, the ships were spotted in Baffin Bay east of the passage's entrance. No one saw them after that. At that time, there was no radio communication between the ships, and the crew members couldn't report a problem. They also couldn't get out of the ice and sail back, and couldn't send lifeboats to inform people about their troubles. They found themselves in a desperate situation. A couple of years later, it became obvious that something had happened to Erebus and Terror. Still, Britain didn't send other ships to rescue the missing expedition. 3 years after the start of their mission, Captain Franklin's wife, Jane Franklin, demanded to send a new journey to find the lost ships. Over the next 10 years, the United Kingdom and the United States organized more than 30 voyages to the Northwest Passage. However, they were unsuccessful. Erebus and Terror and their crews were still missing. By then, the news about the unsuccessful expedition had spread all over Britain. Humanity has spent more than 160 years searching for clues about what happened to the crews of the two ships, and we still don't have an accurate picture of what happened. During all these years, researchers have found strange clues raising more questions than answers. For example, a document called Victory Point Note was found on the shore of King William Island. It was a page from a logbook with 2 handwritten messages. The first note stated that the expedition had been going according to plan. Franklin successfully commanded people, and there were no problems. The second recording was made a year after the first. By that time, the crews had been doing much worse. Franklin and 24 sailors didn't survive. HMS Erebus and Terror got stuck in the ice near King William Island, and the entire crew was forced to leave them. What happened to them next remains a mystery. They had little chance of surviving among the endless ice and strong winds. Also, according to one theory, their situation worsened because they consumed food with high lead levels. But most likely, after their food supplies had run out, they went to look for help and got lost in the snowy plains. Another strange artifact of this expedition is the Peglar Papers. During one of the expeditions in 1860, researchers found a notebook in German. What was written there remains an unencrypted message. Some words were written backwards, and others were smeared. Those sentences that specialists managed to read didn't make sense. The lines contained incoherent words like "shan't want some grog to wet our whistle," "all my art, Tom, for I don't think for," and other similar messages. It's possible that the author of the letter was delirious and didn't understand what was happening. But some researchers believe the note may contain encrypted information about what happened to the crew members. A months-long stay in an icy land, where snow and sun dazzle your eyes during the whole day, and at night the wind penetrates to the bones, can drive anyone crazy. But the most terrible thing in such a situation is the clear understanding that there will likely be no salvation. Erebus and Horror were the most advantaged ships. It seemed unlikely that, at the time, another boat would have been able to go as far as they did. The last people who saw the crew members alive were the local Inuit tribes living in these snowy plains. During the expeditions to find Franklin's team, one of the Inuits told how they had met a group of Europeans almost 300 miles east of King William Island. But it is still unknown what kind of relationships between the sailors and the locals were. In an icy land, hunting is necessary for survival. Now imagine that about 100 people sailed to the island and found themselves trapped. They began to catch deer, thereby depriving the locals of food. Who knows what kind of conflict it could trigger? In 2014, Canada organized an expedition to where the ships were supposedly stuck. The researchers managed to find HMS Erebus at the ocean bottom using the latest equipment. And 2 years later, during a new expedition, experts found Terror lying under tons of icy water northwest of Erebus. However, according to the found notes, the crews of both ships abandoned the vessels in a different place than where they were actually found. Erebus lay 60 miles south of the location indicated in the records. It's hard to believe that an undercurrent could move such giant ships. Perhaps the crew members abandoned the ship, wrote about it in their diary, but then decided to return. They sailed a short distance and left the vessel again. But the second time, they didn't specify their location. According to another version, giant drifting glaciers could move the ships from their original place. The history of the Franklin expedition attracts many historians and researchers worldwide. Even now, people organize expensive, dangerous expeditions in search of answers. There are Inuit witnesses, notes, dozens of versions, and discovered ships, but there is still no complete idea of what happened to the brave navigators.
Thick fog is rising over the ocean as the sun is slowly sinking towards the horizon. It's hard to see further away than a few dozen feet, but that's enough to notice a hulking, skeletal shape in the distance. As your ship approaches the figure, your heart beats faster, and then you make out the details of another vessel, abandoned by the looks of it. Ghost ships do exist, and their mysteries aren't always solved. Take MV Hoita, for example. It was a wooden vessel built in 1931 as a luxury yacht. It had served well to various people over 20 years before it was bought by a Samoan sailor and became a merchant ship. In 1955, though, Hoita's service came to an abrupt and mysterious end. On October 3rd, it set sail for another trading voyage that should have taken no more than 48 hours. Delays happen in the sea, so when Hoita didn't arrive on October 5th as scheduled, there was little worry yet. But then it failed to come on the following day too. There was no distress signal or any other sign of Hoita's presence anywhere between its departure and arrival points. A search and rescue party was dispatched to find the ship, and for 6 days, they were scouting the area of nearly 100,000 square miles. On October 12th, the mission returned to the base empty-handed. Hoita vanished without a trace. It was only a month later that another merchant ship, Tuvalu, noticed the missing vessel far away from its route, drifting in the open sea and listing heavily. The sailors boarded the ship and found that all of its crew and passengers, 25 people total, were missing, along with all the cargo the vessel had been carrying. The radio was tuned to the International Distress Channel, meaning that the crew had been trying to ask for help, but they couldn't reach anyone because the radio cable had been damaged, limiting the range to 2 miles. The lifeboats were missing as well, indicating that people on board must have left the ship. Unfortunately, they seem to have taken the logbook with them, leaving the rescue team clueless as to what had happened. Even today, the mystery of MV Hoita hasn't been solved yet. No one knows where the crew and passengers had gone and what had caused them to leave. SV Carol A. Deering wasn't a ghost ship in the usual sense of the word. There were no sightings of it in the open sea. Instead, it was found on the shore, but the circumstances of it running aground are a puzzle shrouded in mystery. Carol A. Deering was built in 1919 in Maine, and it was a large vessel made for commercial voyages. Unfortunately, despite its large cost of construction, it had only served for a year before its last trip. July 19, 1920. The ship was traveling from Puerto Rico to Rio de Janeiro via Newport News to deliver a cargo of coal. It was almost halfway to the final destination when the captain fell seriously ill, and the crew turned back to drop him and his son off and replace the captain. The voyage went without incident, but when it came to Barbados in December to resupply, there were strange moods among the crew. The first mate didn't seem to be happy with the new captain. No one paid much attention to it back then, when they probably should have. The last sighting of Carol A. Deering at sea was on January 28, 1921, when a lightship noticed it off the coast of North Carolina. There was some commotion on the quarterdeck of the ship, where the crew were normally not allowed. Then, another vessel sighted it, but there was already no one on the decks. On January 31st, the merchant ship was found hard aground in the Diamond Shoals, a site notorious for numerous shipwrecks that had been occupying there for centuries. When the search and rescue party boarded the ship, they found it abandoned, the log and personal belongings of the crew gone, along with the 2 lifeboats. There is still no answer to what happened on board of Carol A. Deering that January, although the most popular version was mutiny. Maybe we'll never find out the truth though. SS Bechimo is perhaps one of the most notable ghost ships in history. This large cargo steamer was built in 1914 in Sweden and plodded its way dutifully over 16 years, trading provisions for pelts with native tribes of Alaska and Canada. But then, on October 1st, 1931, Bechimo got caught in pack ice. At first, it seemed the crew would be able to wait it out and continue on their route because the ship broke free in a couple of days. But in less than a week, it became caught again, this time for good. In another week, a rescue party was sent to fetch 22 of the Bechimo's crew, while another 15 remained behind to wait through the winter if necessary and get the ship back. But a month later, after a powerful blizzard struck their camp, the sailors went out of their shelters only to find the ship gone. Luckily, a few days later, a native hunter told them Bechimo hadn't been lost yet. He'd seen it about 45 miles from where they had been stationed. They managed to track it down, but decided the ship wouldn't survive the winter, so they took the most valuable cargo from its hold and abandoned it. They were wrong though. SS Bechimo did survive that winter, and many more that followed. When the ice broke, it sailed away on its own, drifting listlessly along the shores of Canada and Alaska. There were numerous sightings of the ghost ship, sometimes adrift in the open sea, and at other times stuck in the pack ice again. People attempted to board and salvage it, but weather conditions or lack of equipment always prevented them. SS Bechimo was last sighted by Native Alaskans in 1969, 38 years after its abandonment. What became of it later remains unknown. The story of SS Orang Medan is one of the most puzzling and harrowing ghost ship stories of the 20th century. No one even knows for sure if the ship even existed in the first place. It wasn't recorded in Lloyd's Shipping, the International Register of Ships, which makes it either a tall tale or a vessel that avoided being officially recognized for some shady reasons. In any case, the accounts as to what happened to the Medan vary. According to most reports, it was carrying some unknown cargo in the Indonesian waters when a distress call was received by another ship in the vicinity. The officer on duty heard an SOS message, but its contents are different depending on the accounts. The message did not repeat, and the crew of Medan didn't answer to any attempts to contact it back. The ship that received the distress call hurried to the rescue, but they only reached the vessel the following day, when it was already drifting and slightly listing. When the rescuers boarded the ship, they found that none of the crew had survived. However, one lifeboat was missing, which implied that there was at least one crew member who managed to escape. What happened to the rest of the people on board remains a mystery to this day. Still, there are no hard facts about this story, so we might never find out whether SS Orang Medan was actually a ship and not a thing of fiction. SV Sabrina was a 3-mast sailing barge built in 1873 for river trade ships in South America. She served for well over 4 decades, proving to be a sturdy and reliable ship. It was later transferred to Europe, where it continued serving its purpose well. But then, in October 1917, Sabrina set sail on a regular voyage only to be found ashore several days later. Mysteriously, although the ship was perfectly intact, the entire crew of 5 and the captain were gone. There is no direct evidence or hard facts as to what really happened that day. The most convincing theory is that the crew were washed away from the deck because of an underwater explosion. And then the ship sailed ahead without them, but the truth, as always, remains unknown.
It's 2018. You get up early in the morning to go ashore and catch some fish. You come to the spot you were yesterday, throw the hook into the sea, and wait. The float is twitching. You've caught some fish, but hey, hello? Why aren't you doing anything? Right now, you don't care about the fish. You're looking at something in the distance. You open your mouth in surprise since you see a huge ship stuck on a shoal. It wasn't here yesterday, so it got here at night. Okay, it'll probably sail away sooner or later. You fish for a few more hours. During this time, you observe the ship and notice no movement there. Is it empty? Boats and the coastal service are sailing from the shore to the vessel. You decide to check it out too. You get in your old boat and go there. The mist descends to the water, making the ship look creepy. The colossal vessel is rusty and empty. But where is the whole crew? And how did it get there? The Coast Guard comes on board. They search the hold, the cabins, and the upper deck. There's someone's stuff, some remnants of food supplies, notebooks, and clothes. Everything suggests the crew has disappeared for some reason. Fishers who noticed the vessel first didn't see anyone coming down from the board. No radio signals were sent to the port, and no one reported about the ship. It appeared here from nowhere. The only chance to get any information is to look at the number and name of the vessel. This is Sam Ratulangi, PB 1600. The Coast Guard checks the information, studies the data of all the country ships, and no way. One company built the boat in 2001 in Indonesia. People used it to transport heavy loads across the seas around Asia. The ship had been properly operating for 8 years. People were delivering industrial goods to different points in the region, but something went wrong. In 2009, Sam Ratulangi was sailing near the coast of Taiwan, and that's it. There were no further records about it. There were no reports in any port. Everyone thought it must have drowned, so no one had been looking for it for years. And then, 9 years later, it appears here, big and rusty, off the coast of Myanmar, without sailors, without fuel. An investigation starts. City services are trying to find out the names of all the sailors working on the ship and find clues that would lead to solving this mystery. They also hope the ship owner will appear soon. They find 2 tow ropes on board. This means that some other ship towed Samratulangi to this place. Then they identify and find 13 crew members. These people say they wanted to reach the factory in Bangladesh to repair Samratulangi. Another vessel helped tow the ship, but then 2 cables tore off, and a storm began. No one wanted to stay on board during such weather, so the crew members left it. No one knows what the ship has been doing for the last 9 years, and how it was possible without people on board. And here's another, much more mysterious ship story. On February 16, 2020, locals found a large cargo ship stuck on a rocky shore off the coast of an Irish village. The boat looked rusty, with holes in the hull and rotten parts. People hadn't seen this vessel the day before, so it appeared there at night. The last time people saw the Alta cargo ship was a few months earlier, thousands of miles off the coast of Ireland. That day, the Alta was sailing in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Another ship, the MS Protector, noticed it. MS Protector crew members tried to contact the ship, but received no response. The people on board realized that they were facing an empty vessel. And then, 5 months later, it appeared near the coast of Ireland. There are more questions than answers in this story, but we managed to find something out. In 2015, the Alta appeared and disappeared from the radar several times. Any ship has an internal tracking system, so people can track its route using satellites. But Alta crew members often disabled this system. Perhaps they were engaged in some illegal activity. Anyway, in 2017, the ship often sailed between the ports of Greek islands. Then, the tracking signal disappeared and appeared only 10 months later, off the coast of North Africa. During this time, the ship changed several flags. In September 2018, the Alta was southeast of Bermuda and headed for Haiti. Then, the crew started facing problems. First, the main engine failed right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The ship began to drift. Several days passed, but the crew members weren't able to repair it. They began to run out of food and water supplies. The situation got even worse when they found out that a hurricane was approaching the place. Fortunately, they managed to contact the U.S. Coast Guard. A helicopter flew to the Alta on October 2nd to bring them some supplies. There was enough food for several days. Then, a rescue boat sailed to the ship. It evacuated all the sailors and delivered them to Puerto Rico before the hurricane. The Alta had to drift alone in the ocean. After a while, another ship approached the Alta to tow it to the shores of Guyana. But at this moment, everything went wrong. Someone stole the boat, disabled the tracking system, and sailed away in an unknown direction. After almost a year, the MS Protector found the empty Alta in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And then, 9 months later, the ship without a crew sailed to the shores of Ireland. How did it manage to travel across the Atlantic and get to the coast of Ireland? It's still a mystery. Maybe it was just luck. No one else saw the ship all this time. It was just covering huge distances, surviving storms. Who's the captain? What happened to the thieves? Who owns the ship now? One day, someone called the village administration and introduced themselves as the vessel owner. But that unknown person didn't provide any evidence. They found several barrels of oil on the ship, which they took away by helicopter. The Alta was rusting. Corrosion of metal could damage the environment. The vessel had no commercial value, yet it would have taken millions to get rid of it. There were 3 options for what to do: leave the ship where it was, tow it into the sea and let it sink, or disassemble it for scrap. But nature had its own plans. Storms and strong waves split the hull into 2 parts. The Alta was drifting without a crew in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean for about 2 years. But this is nothing compared to a ship that was traveling for 38 years. The record belongs to the SS Bechimo. It was a merchant vessel owned by some trading company. In 1931, the ship found itself on the ice off the coast of Alaska. Its movement slowed down. A thick layer of ice blocked the ship, and a strong storm only made the situation worse. The blizzard was so intense that the crew members couldn't see anything but a white veil in front of their eyes. Sailing any further was impossible. The team had to wait for the storm to end. They waited for a day, 2, 3 days. A week had passed, but the snowstorm was only getting stronger. Then, one day, it grew weaker. The crew members split into 2 teams. The first team went to the nearest city. The second group, along with the captain, stayed on board. They set up camp next to the ship and waited for the blizzard, which had started again, to end. There was 0 visibility. And finally, one day, the storm was over. Great! And now, wait a minute. But where is the ship? The SS Bechimo just disappeared during the blizzard. The captain was sure that the ship had sunk, so he left along with the crew. Then, a week later, they saw the vessel drifting near the area where they had lost it. The hull was damaged so severely that it was unsafe to sail on it. Repairing the ship would be pointless and expensive, so the captain decided to abandon it. He was sure that it would go underwater sooner or later, but it stayed afloat for the next few days, the next few months, and a few years. People had reported seeing it at various points along the coast of Alaska for 38 years. The last record of the SS Bechimo is dated 1969. Those who saw it claimed the ship was completely frozen, almost merged with the ice. Some people planned to start an expedition to find the ship, but all attempts were unsuccessful. The vessel is probably lying somewhere on the deep sea floor.